happy Sunday. Thank you so much for taking a break from your summer afternoon to join me on Facebook. Today I'm going to be talking about applying for United States citizenship. The question that I get asked so often, especially lately, is how can someone who's in the United States apply for U.S. citizenship? And how is it that there are people who've been here 10, 20 years who still don't have citizenship or any status at all? What did they do wrong, or what could they do to change their status? I'm also often asked, if someone's not here in the U.S., can they still get into the United States? And what's required to get a U.S. passport? And these are the questions that I'm going to answer today. First of all, the minimum requirement for applying for a U.S. citizenship, with the rare exception of someone who's on active duty military service, is that you have to be in the United States as a lawful permanent resident. That is what we call a green card holder, which you've probably heard the term green card before. So that means that you have to have actually immigrated to the U.S., be living here with permanent residence, have a current green card, and then meet the presence and residency requirements to actually put in an application for U.S. citizenship. The requirements are, if you're married to a U.S. citizen, then you only have to be a permanent resident for 3 years to apply for citizenship. It's important to know that those 3 years must have also been spent in marriage to a U.S. citizen. So if you're a permanent resident and you just got your green card, then you still have to have the permanent resident card and be married during that 3 years, and you can apply. They're really the only people who can apply early. Everyone else who's a lawful permanent resident has to be a resident for at least 5 years before you are eligible to become a U.S. citizen. And a matter of confusion that often comes up is, if you have your green card but you haven't been living in the United States, can you still become a citizen? And the general rule is that you have to have both physical presence in the U.S. and maintain your residency for what we call a continuity of residence. What a lot of people think when they hear that, or they've looked into it, is that you have to come to the U.S. at least once every 6 months. Now, that's not really the rule. That's kind of just how it's been interpreted. And this is really, it's too complex for just a Facebook video. But what they really mean is that you have to be living, working, and really call the U.S. your home. And if you've been gone often, if you have many trips, or you've been out of the U.S. longer than 6 months, it's possible you've broken that chain of residency. So if you travel a lot, even though you might have had your green card for 5 years, definitely talk to a lawyer just to make sure that you qualify before you start. Now, what really concerns people right now, when you're trying to help maybe a friend or a relative or someone that you know that's been here a long time, and you think that they qualify for citizenship, and then you find out they tell you, I've never had a green card. What can we do in that situation? At that point, it's best to call a lawyer, have someone come in and really look at their situation. We look at, is there someone who can sponsor them? Do they have a U.S. citizen, adult child? Do they have a parent, a spouse who could sponsor them? Are they qualify for any kind of employment sponsorship? Are they afraid to return to their home country? Are they being persecuted? Are they being threatened? Have they been trafficked? All these things we look at to see if there's any options for them. I mean, unfortunately, what's not going to be an option in most cases for someone who's never had a green card, unless we can dig up a parent or someone who might have transmitted citizenship, is that we have to get them legal status first. They have to get their lawful permanent resident status, build the time, get their 5 years, and then become a U.S. citizen. And it's really hard. Even for someone with a technical background or a degree, you still have to have an employment sponsor for most types of visas. For a family sponsorship, you're looking at an immediate relative. You need to have a spouse who's a U.S. citizen. If you have a child who's a U.S. citizen, they have to be an adult. They have to be at least 21 or older. Just a little baby isn't going to be able to sponsor their parents. So the options can be really limited, and it's just not as easy as sometimes you might hear, or you make it sound out that people need to get in line. Well, the line is based on actually having a case that you can file. The second challenge is actually, once someone becomes a permanent resident, is maintaining that. If they're called away to their home country, they have a sick parent, someone, an emergency back home, they have to really be careful that they're not abandoning their green card to go deal with that. If you've been gone over 6 months, you may not qualify to easily come back in, even if you had a green card before. Now, often there's stuff that we can do to help someone, even sometimes when they've been gone several years, we may be able to document that they didn't intend to abandon their green card and help them get it back. It's always important to talk to a lawyer. Don't just give up. Make sure you've tried everything to get your card back. Some people can start the process over. We want to avoid that if we can, because then they're just starting the clock for 5 more years to become a U.S. citizen. It's also not as easy as people assume for someone who's born to a U.S. citizen. If you're born inside the U.S., whether your parents are citizens or not, you're considered a citizen. However, if you were born outside the United States, even if one of your parents was a U.S. citizen, it becomes very complex. It's about whether you automatically became a citizen or not. So we have to look at, is your parent living in the U.S.? How long did they live there? How old are they? Look at everything we can to see if we can document that person's already actually a U.S. citizen. Another misconception that I see is if someone marries a U.S. citizen, do you automatically become a U.S. citizen as well? And the truth is that no, nothing happens. If you marry a U.S. citizen, unless that U.S. citizen spouse puts in a petition for you and is able to get you a lawful permanent resident, your status hasn't changed at all. You're whatever that you were before. And if you had no status, just getting married to a U.S. citizen isn't going to give you the status unless you go through the immigration process. And sometimes it's not that easy. If a person has been ordered removed, if they've been deported before, even if they married a U.S. citizen, it can be very difficult to get them their green card. But there are options. There are a lot of options that we can explore. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the citizenship test. A lot of clients get really nervous about the test and studying for it and what they need to do. There are 3 components to the citizenship test. The first part is what we call the civics test. That is a U.S. geography, history. There's 100 possible questions they could choose from. I always tell clients, make sure you know all the questions. We don't know which ones are going to come up. They're very easy to memorize. USCIS puts out all kinds of study guides. It's very easy to find these questions and answers so that you're prepared. The next part is the English reading and writing. It's very important that if you're someone who's not a native English speaker that's applying, that you understand that you can't just memorize the questions, memorize your application. You also really need to be able to communicate in English. That means answer general questions. If the officer skips around on your application, that you can talk about it with them. If you've just memorized the application, you've just memorized the civics test, you may struggle during the interview. And in that case, if you fail the English test or if you fail the civics part of the test, you will be invited to come back one more time. They'll give you a few months to study, get prepared, and they'll send you a second interview notice and you'll go back again. If you fail either the English or the civics test the second time around, at that point your application for citizenship will be denied and you'll need to start back over at the very beginning. Put in a new application, a new fee, and wait the amount of time to get it. There are some exceptions for the English and civics. The first is what we call the 50-20 exception. And that means if you're age 50 years or older and you've been in the United States as a permanent resident for at least 20 years, you can qualify for the English language requirement. Now that means you actually have to be living here with a green card, not just living here. The second is the 55-15 exception, and that means you're older than age 55 and you've lived as a permanent resident for at least 15 years. if you meet these exceptions, you may be able to take the civics test in your natural language and skip out on the English. Last question I have for today is, what if my green card is expired? Can I still apply for citizenship? And this is a tricky one because yes, you can apply for citizenship even if your green card is expired. And I mean expired, which means you're supposed to renew it and you didn't, but you still are a permanent resident. You haven't abandoned it or had it revoked. Then you can apply, but you should renew the green card because this application process, it can take a number of months. For some people, it takes over a year. And just having your naturalization case pending is not going to be proof of your status for work authorization. It's not going to be proof to the DMV when you go to get your driver's license. It won't be good for travel. You really need to renew that green card. I know now you're paying that fee on top of the citizenship application fee, but it's important to always have evidence of your U.S. status. Even if you're pursuing a different status, you should still have that card to show that you're here lawfully. And that's all I have today. If you have any other immigration questions you want to ask me, I will be going live again next week. So please just put your questions in the comments and I will get back to it. And enjoy your Sunday afternoon. Thank you. Goodbye.